Hello and welcome to the 111th episode of the Adoption and Fostering Podcast. We are the Betamax video in the Ritz video rental store of the adoption industry. With me, Al Coates, and him,
a rather embarrassed Scott Cassenred. Why do you keep using that word industry, though? Do you just do it to wind people up? Because we both know that we hate that word, don't we?
I'm not sure. I think I might do it just to wind you up. Who knows?
Yeah, you do it so well.
Thank you.
How are you, Al?
I am video conferenced, called, teamed, zoomed out. I'm on my 27th hour this week of doing it, so I'm pretty frazzled by looking at screens and shouting. But other than that, I did 3
hours a day. I did 3 hours a day and had a headache. So I don't know how you do all that. It's only Tuesday.
I know, it's shocking, isn't it? Anyway, but I'm well, and I think we've had a really interesting sort of 36, 24, 12 hours, haven't we? We've kind of thrown ourselves into the world of questions and answers with Krish Kandiah, which is really exciting. Yeah. So, which is the main reason of tonight's episode, I think, is we got loads and loads of responses. How many did we get in total? Do you know?
Oh, do you know? I think in total we got over, nearly 30 in total. I think,
wow.
Which I know doesn't seem too much, but for this, actually, it's the most we've ever received on one topic, let's face it. And it wasn't just kind of flimmy-flammy questions. There was some really, stuff that I didn't think about, and then stuff that came in that I was pleased was asked as well, because, I think with someone like Krish, we didn't want to be the ones that were putting our questions to him. Well, I didn't anyway, and I know that we got an opportunity, but there was a lot of questions that came in that I would have wanted to ask him, which made it even all the better. But there was some that we didn't get a chance to ask him because we did have a limited amount of time. But he has agreed to look over them and reply. So
try the smashing of the fella.
It is very nice of him. I mean, I don't think he realises just how many he's got to answer, but whatever.
Keep him out of mischief. So he got the job sort of middle of December, didn't he? So he's this is the first week of him sort of doing the job. So really, I feel we slightly strong-armed him into coming on the podcast. I think we made it. We did.
But he does, we'll play out in the interview that we did with him. But, this is an exclusive. He admitted that this is an exclusive, so we're going to go with that. If we've got an exclusive, here's your exclusive.
So here we are, we're an interview with Krish Kandiah.
So we are joined now by the newly appointed chair of the Adoption and Special Guardianship Leadership Board, which we're now going to call the ASGLB for short, now that we've said exactly what that stands for. Krish Kandiah. Welcome, Krish.
Hey, good morning. Nice to meet you, Scott. Good to see you, Al.
Hello.
Yeah. And it is morning, which is quite unusual for Al and I to do any of these interviews in the morning. So the caffeine is still being ingested. So let's crack on, because we've got a lot of questions for you.
Sure.
And we want to try and ask as many as possible.
We've got a lot of questions.
Start attacking us for not asking them. So for those that don't know you, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So my name is Krish Kandiah. I'm married to Miriam. We are foster carers, we're adoptive parents. We have 6 children that live with us. 3 are our birth kids and 3 are fostered or adopted. We live near Oxford, and before I was appointed to the chair of the Adoption and Special Guardianship Leadership Board, I was running a charity called Home for Good.
Cool. And you've been appointed very recently, has to be said. And you're still finding your feet with it, as we got,
definitely,
as we've made clear.
We'll give you some grace.
Exactly. So, tell us of your kind of perception of the role that you've just kind of agreed to undertake with the ASGLB.
Yeah, good question. The board members were asked to say to me what my job involved and what my priorities should be, and it seems like each board member rightly had a different expansive vision for what I was supposed to be doing. I think the ASGLB was set up under Martin Neri back in the day, and it was originally, I think, there to kind of hold the government to account on how it was doing with its vision for adoption. And eventually it was recognised that adoption isn't the only permanency model that we really need to be looking at. And so special guardianship was added as well. And so I think we're basically trying to be a kind of independent body that kind of sits in the gap between the government and the sector, hopefully helping the government when it's got good intentions and good desires to kind of make great outcomes for children when it comes to permanency, and hopefully in one sense speaking on behalf of the sector and stakeholders and adoptees and adopters and special guardians and about how we see what actually works on the ground. Hopefully you end up with better policy and better practice as a result.
Mm-hmm. So just going back to your predecessor, Andrew Christie, he had a bit of a priority with regionalisation. Is there a specific, or do you not even know yet, what your priority is going to be? Have you got one? Have you thought of one? Have they said what you want you to do? Is there a specific task to undertake?
Well, I'm glad you've asked. I'm still meeting all the individual board members to find out, let's just meet each other. It's a big board at the moment. I think there are 30 people that sit around it in some form or another. So I'm meeting all the board members one-on-one as best I can to kind of get under the skin, find out what the real desires and needs are. I've also, I don't know if it's going to be live in time for the launch of the podcast. I hope it will be. I've got a little survey that I'm putting around. I want to hear from anyone who's got an interest in adoption or special guardianship, who might be in the sector, or you might be adopted yourself. Tell us what you think should be the priority right now. I mean, at one level, there's a care review about to kick off, and that care review has to look at special guardianship and adoption. It's such an important part of making sure kids get the right outcomes. So I'm hoping we'll be able to seriously, significantly inform that review. I think COVID's taught us a lot about systems and what's working and what's not working. I think it's brought out the best in lots of areas of the sector, lots of innovation, lots of willingness to kind of figure out how to do things digitally and more efficiently. But also, it's put loads of pressure on families. We've seen that with the kind of rise in domestic violence. We've seen that in the rise in number of children being made aware to care services, and also if contact with birth parents has been really difficult. So a whole different set of factors. So I'm hoping we've learnt a lot from that, and again we can push forward to innovate. But personally, one of the areas I'm particularly interested in is children that haven't been achieving a genuine permanency option. So kids whose plan has been for adoption and they've been waiting the longest, or they've come to a point where we've kind of thought we're never going to find you an adoptive parent, and so they've kind of aged out of care without ever finding permanency, or special guardianship where special guardians haven't really got the support they needed, and so those placements have actually become really, really difficult. So those are the kind of interests. Those either children left behind or children in really difficult circumstances. That's where my personal passion comes.
Yeah, fab. Right, Al, come on, you've been biting your tongue for...
No, I mean, I think what I, and I'm not sure why, but I think when Andrew Christie was announced as the head of the board, I think there was a press release and there was no great, it was kind of just happened. I think that when, what I found is really interesting, and maybe that's because we've been stirring the waters a little bit, is that we've seen that there's been a huge level of interest in your appointment. And I think Scott reflected that we've got dozens of questions, people just really, really curious about you and about your role. And as Scott said, we probably can't get to all of them, but we'll try and bulk them together. And so these are the questions we've been asked. One of them is in relation to kind of your previous experience. People are quite, as I think we've chatted before and said, adopters are quite curious in that they do their research. They're quite dangerous, so be careful. Hell hath no fury like the wrath of an adopter. So one of the concerns was that actually, as the chair of the board, you have no actual social work experience. You've not worked in the actual social care system, and so people are concerned, that or are asking that question about how seriously will you be taken by the system, and how can you reflect on, I've got some really specific questions about things like signs of safety, about signposting to things. What are your thoughts and reflections on that? What's your answer to those criticisms?
Sure. No, that's a good question. I haven't worked directly in social work. Unlike you, Al, I don't have social work qualifications. I guess there's no one that could kind of perfectly fit everything that's needed. I think what I do bring instead is lived experience. So I don't think there's ever been an adopter that's been chairing the Adoption and Special Guardian Leadership Board. I don't think there's ever been a foster carer taking on that role. So I've got the experience from the other side of the table. And, we've had people with social work experience. So maybe it's kind of flipping the tables a little bit and seeing what things look like from elsewhere. We do have great representation from local authorities through the ADCS, so that's going to help us. And I'm a quick study, so I'm hoping through talking to the right people, making sure the board's got the right representation, we'll be able to kind of make up for my lack. But that's always the case with taking on a role. You don't fit every criteria possible.
That's fair enough. You mentioned your own experience. One comment that I think the first question we got was, your social media accounts are so positive about your family life, but people are sort of questioning, do you experience the struggles that a lot of families are experiencing? The reason that people are actually trying to access support. Are they things that you know of? Because you are, it's your character and personality, but is there some sort of gritty reality to your life, or are you just living this Disney-esque adoption dream?
Oh, if only. That would be lovely. I guess with social media, I do want to be a positive influence, and inspiration is kind of something that I'm keen for people to see. When fostering or adoption hit the news headlines, they're normally kind of negative words, so I kind of just want to address the balance there. I talk a lot about fostering. I guess the other side of it, and it's always a challenge, isn't it? Like I want my kids to be able to tell their own stories, and if I start telling all the terrible things that have been going on, then that paints them in a picture that I don't think is helpful. So hopefully it's not too saccharine, but yeah, for sure. We've looked after 30 children over the last 15 years through foster care. We've experienced they've experienced some awful situations, and our job has been to try and be the best support and help that we can be. That we've looked after children who have come to us from A&E because they've experienced domestic violence, and then straight from A&E to our doorstep. But it's turning up at 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah,
I don't want to counter that, but I think that what people are reflecting is that, and people are very keen that we don't want to know your children's story. It's no one's business but theirs. But I think that the challenges that a lot of families face their children are one aspect of that, but the big challenge, and I guess the nature of the role, is that actually it's the systems that people are struggling against. And so is that something you've experienced, in access to support,
totally.
Adoption support fund, safeguarding, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So the children that live with us all have additional needs, and that's meant some really challenging circumstances with school provision. 2 years of fighting to try and get the right teaching arrangements. Our kids were being taught in a corridor because they were seen to be too disruptive to be in the lesson. So
that's really encouraging, because it's kind of in a really horrible sort of dark sort of way. But I think that often people, I've kind of, because a lot of people, the minute you were announced, went, oh, he's on Twitter, and so they've spent, they're in lockdown. Sure. Have gone back to day one, basically, and seen what was his first tweet, and they've just kind of seen this unreservedly positive experience. But it's good to know that actually you've experienced a bit of the more edgy stuff from professionals, which is good.
Well, every child that comes into care has had something awful, some kind of terrible experience in their lives. Yeah. So the reality of fostering and adoption is, there are going to be struggles to make sure the kids get the care and help that they need, and the system is under a lot of stress. It's hard, isn't it? Sometimes you're fighting with a school, and you respect all the teachers, and they're kind of doing the best they can under really difficult circumstances. but still your children aren't being provided for, so you've got kind of no choice really.
It's difficult. Right, Scott, have at him.
So,
have at him. I've got such a list of questions, honestly.
No, I know. I feel like we're being quite professional today, actually.
Very good.
I know. We also got, which is really good as well, and thank you to everybody who has been adopted and who sent in questions as well. So we've had quite a few, and I'm going to try and not necessarily... I guess the thing is, when it comes to talking to adopted people, we're traversing a few generations with this.
Sure.
And obviously, more recently, we've gotten a better understanding of the fact that, you know, whether they were born and adopted in the 60s or born and adopted, Al and I always call them the Children Act generation. There's still issues. There's still issues around adoption and stuff. One of the big things is about the support that they receive. And that's the top question I would probably prioritise in terms of what adoptees or adopted people have asked. So what are your thoughts on that? And the fact that, you know, if you're 18 with no education healthcare plan, or, you know, you can't access ASF, what's your thoughts on that?
So, sorry, Scott, say again. So if you're 18 and you can't access...
So I'd not necessarily them access it, but, you know, if you've no EHCP, and you're 21, say, as an example, you wouldn't be able to access ASF for support. But, you know, it's ongoing, isn't it? You know, whether they're 12 or 25, if they've been adopted, there's, you know, they may be looking for that support that they can't access because of funding. And if they can't access ASF, it was a question that was asked yesterday, actually, where a 12-year-old for the same service had applied, and a 21-year-old, and this is his parent talking, not the 21-year-old. The 21-year-old had applied as well, and the 12-year-old had been granted it, but the 21-year-old hadn't. So, you know, it's that kind of gap of support for adopted people, depending on their age and postcode and, you know, all those sorts of things. So I guess what I'm asking is what's your thoughts around that, and how we can kind of, you know, proactively kind of narrow that gap or even fill it altogether.
No, it's a really helpful question, Scott. I'd say on we haven't had an adoption and special guardianship leadership board yet, but one of the missing elements, it seems from the outside, is adoptee voice and the voice of the child in general. Same with special guardianship, and you know, those sort of issues come out when you listen to those voices, and I don't think we have necessarily paid enough attention to those voices. We've got reference groups that exist at the moment. There's an adopter reference group that you guys are involved with, but I'd love to see us have one that involves the adoptee voice of the child, because I think there are probably lots of areas in the system where we're just not aware of some of the challenges and the needs. So I wasn't aware that they weren't able to access the Adoption Support Fund because of an age restriction. That's news to me, so thank you for letting me know.
No, that's fine. I guess that there's part of it is, like you said, you know, adopters for so long have been listened to because obviously, like Al said, we do our research, and then we, you know, part of the role that we took on when we adopted, I guess, is advocacy for our children. And I guess that, you know, what people are saying now is that the adults are beginning to come out of not out of the other side, but you know, they're coming to a position now where they know what they want as well, and they're able to ask for what they want. So, you know, whilst I don't necessarily agree that, you know, adopters have taken it over. I think we've had to, because actually there's not been any kind of platform for adoptees, and I think that if that's something that can be, you know, factored in. In fact, there was 3 questions around that, and factoring in the voice of the adopted person. So I think you've kind of clarified that. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
I was going to ask a question which is sort of similarly linked. I mean, on a really practical level, the board meets with 30 people around a table, which is just awesome, really, isn't it?
You say that. You say that.
It was really awesome.
Virtual table.
Virtual table. How are you? I mean, what are your thoughts about readdressing the balance of power? Because, you know, we had a pre-conversation, just a full declaration, and we were talking about how, you know, social work voices are represented by the heads of services, which is not really true. But actually, things like special guardianship, children who live through a special guardianship, adopted children.
Yeah.
Families who experience the loss of children. They're all voices. They're all people who, if anything, have got more of a stake than anyone, because they have no choice. You know, as an adopter, I had a choice day one, and I have a seat at the table. Well, literally have a seat at the table, but all those other people don't. And have you got any thoughts about how you readdress that balance, that power? You know, not that you necessarily need to knock us down, but you need to maybe pick us up, and then still have a board meeting of 30 people.
So I was surprised that there were 30 people around a board table or a Zoom board meeting, and the challenge for decision making is really complicated. As far as I understand, the board's been meeting for 2 hours. 30 people. I think someone did. Did you do the maths yesterday? Someone did.
I might have done. Yeah, it doesn't add up.
6 minutes. 6 minutes per person, and we're dealing with some huge challenges. You know, as we said, care review, impact of COVID. An area I hope we're going to get to talk about is BME, adoption and disparity. So huge issues. How can we possibly? And you're right. There are missing representative voices in the conversation as well. Voice of the child, special guardianship is not necessarily represented enough. Social workers, there's very few BME voices around that table. I think I'm the brownest person in the room at the moment.
Yeah, you've increased it by 100%, I think.
So how we run a board and listen to everybody and make decisions, that's a bit of a tension or a paradox, if you will, because we could just be a board of reference. We make sure every possible group is represented, and then, you know, let's say some government policy comes along, then our job is just to say, well, we asked, 40 people and here's what they said. That is one way of running a board. I don't think anyone would be particularly excited about that, because it's hard. It's not really going to get anything done. So I am looking at ways we might increase the way that we're listening to stakeholders, but decrease the number of people on the board so that we can actually make decisions. That's the tension I'm trying to figure out, and I'm talking it through with board members. It was one of the conversation topics we didn't quite get to yesterday when we were chatting out, but that is something I want to figure out. And yeah, I think we can't just be a talking shop. We've got to be a body that actually is able to bring change, because kids need us to do better.
I think when I'm just picking up on what you're saying there, because I think that sometimes these boards do tend to go like that, don't they? If they're not necessarily not chaired right, but I think when there's different priorities for everybody around that table and they want to get their own, and it can sometimes just end up being 2 hours, not necessarily wasted, but certainly no further forward. So I think that with that in mind, then, what we've talked about adoptees and adopted people and special guardians and stuff like that. What about other communities? I wasn't going to ask this question, but I wasn't going to ask it next, but I'm going to ask it now. Okay. And we're not going to talk about faith and stuff like that, because I think that that's a non-starter in terms of how we deal with that. But some communities, and I'm talking about my own LGBTQ plus community, in terms of how some of us have experienced faith and what have you. How do you think you're going to reach those kind of families? I mean, 1 in 7, 1 in 6 in England, it's now a same-sex family, or a same-sex family. Yeah. Same-sex couples adopted. Let's put it that way. Part of my community would say that faith has affected them in a negative way, and that's not to take anything away from your faith. Obviously, I'm not questioning that. But what I'm saying is, how do you intend to kind of reach those groups through this role? Because it's all very well having organisations who represent parents, but there's kind of there's single adopters as well. There's the Kinship Care Alliance, obviously, and all those kinds of. So how, without increasing the numbers around that table,
I know, yeah.
Because you'd be forever at it, wouldn't you, if you were trying to bring everybody in? But how? Yeah. What would your plan be take the board out of it, really, in terms of engaging with those kind of groups?
It's a good question. I think, and I know it was controversial, what the Secretary of State said in his adoption speech, but I think one of the positives that I was taken out was he was trying to encourage a wider variety of people to kind of enter the system and to come forward. And he recognised we were struggling with BME. He was kind of making some class assumptions as well. So there does seem to be appetite from the government that we are broader. And I share that appetite. I think it's kind of all hands on deck. We want the right matches for children that are in the care system. The way that life is going to go best for these kids is if we have a really wide variety of potential parents come forward through the system. And that's variety of faith, that's variety of class and race and ethnicity and gender and sexuality. Great, everyone in. Let's find the right matches. And one of the reasons I've done the listening exercise that we're going to launch is just to make sure I'm hearing from as many voices as possible. But the tension, you're right, I can't have every possible permutation of group,
family,
single black adopters or Muslim. I don't know. There's too many permutations to make it possibly work. So that's why I think I'm looking for ways that we can hear more widely, even if we had a smaller, more compact board. And that could be more listening exercises, it could be more conferencing, it could be more kind of special events. Imagine that we're looking at, I don't know, an issue like family contact post, birth family contact post adoption. That seems to be an issue that's coming forward. Who do we need in the room? What's the most effective room that we need to put together so we can hear from everybody and then make some really strong policy recommendations? That might be the way we try and do it. But I'm open and please, I'd love your listeners to get in touch and tell me, how we balance this thing, because
there'll be honestly they'll be starting writing already in the complaints. But one thing I was going to say about that was, the one thing I was going to say is that the advantage I think that you might bring this time, and this is no criticism of Andrew, but Andrew didn't really use social media, and whilst it can be a pain in the backside, because obviously you get every man and their troll kind of messaging you. I mean, do you think that's going to make a difference in terms of how you kind of engage with people?
Yeah, I am kind of mildly addicted to social media, and it definitely has helped me connect with people I wouldn't have done otherwise. It sometimes isn't the easiest place to have a nuanced discussion. Sometimes the problem with reading just a few characters is that people can hear it with one tone when it was intended with another one, or I'm in a bad mood and it's late at night and I really shouldn't be on Twitter, and I'm replying unhelpfully. So Twitter's definitely good for kind of sensing the mood and making connections. Out of Twitter, I've had the opportunity to kind of either meet people face to face or Zoom people for a bit more conversation. So hopefully it'll make me more available.
Can I ask a supplementary question to the one Scott did? Because I think that there was a few people wanted to talk about faith, and it's kind of something we're not. It's complicated because on one level it's a very personal issue. However,
sure.
And what you believe is your business. Very firmly believe that. However, you've are you a doctor of theology? I'm not sure. You've come, you are a doctor of theology. So and your roots are very firmly in the church culture, church community, and the church kind of business, for want of a better phrase. So a lot of the families have kind of people have contacted me and have said, as some of part of the LGBTQ plus community. Did I get all of that, Scott?
No, you didn't.
Mr.
Never mind.
Okay.
You got them the wrong way around as well.
All right. See, I'll have to go on a course after this.
You're my friend, seriously.
I wouldn't say that. Let's not push it. No. I think that one of the issues is that people are looking back and they can see that, even, you've had strong alliances with the Evangelical Alliance. Sorry for the language, and they've got a particular stance on same-sex relationships. And then so there's people sort of looking and seeing this very clear link because, Home for Good came out of the Evangelical Alliance, and they're saying, hang on, is he really going to be able to represent us and support us, especially when it's 1 in 6? It's not, it's no longer a fringe issue, it's a mainstream issue, isn't it? And people are maybe concerned about your stance on issues of same-sex relationships and that sort of stuff.
So I'm really pro adoption, special guardianship, whatever's the best match for children. And I've been really impressed by the LGBT community, that they've often been willing to come forward and take the children that are waiting the longest, children with additional needs. So fantastic. I'm really excited that is the case. It's the same with, I'm close friends with Shad's from my foster family. He's a Muslim. We don't share the same views about faith, but we share the same views about finding great outcomes for vulnerable children. Many of the social workers I work with are atheists. That's never been a barrier for us working collaboratively, because there's enough common ground on what we do agree on, which is we need to do better for kids waiting inordinately long times to get adopted, or being left behind because they're black, or left behind because they're too old, or left behind because they've got special needs. That's not acceptable. So we're a coalition of the willing, right? Well, all of us can kind of work together, bringing our communities to play a fantastic role. And for me, that works definitely well with LGBT communities.
Yeah, there's like a voice in my head that wants to ask some really difficult questions, but I'm maybe not going to do that. Should I do?
Until he comes back in 6 months.
I'll do that, right?
Ask him again.
Well, in some ways,
You'll have forgotten by then.
Well, I come from an evangelical church background, and so I kind of get when I can tell kind of a good apologist. You're a great apologist for your faith, and I think you are a great communicator, and you're very good at communicating. That's a massive gift, and what this role needs essentially is good communication. But so is that a yes, that you're totally behind? You have no issues whatsoever with same-sex relationships from a theological point of view, or is that just on a personal level? It's irrelevant. We just need to get the job done. Is it?
I'm pro LGBT adoption. I'm pro-Muslim adoption, I'm pro-atheist adoption, I'm pro-Christian adoption. Whoever's the right person to come and be matched, those issues shouldn't be a barrier for people being matched to be adoptive parents. So let's get the kids the homes that they need. That's what I want to achieve. Okay. And I guess, fair enough, come and check on me in 6 months' time, and let's see whether we've engaged the community and we're working collaboratively with the right groups. That's a fair challenge to me, and I'm open. Let's give it a go.
Cool.
And one thing, we talk about adopters being tenacious and advocates. When you meet the LGBT ones, I tell you, you'll know about it if you've managed to. I'm not going to drill down on that point, because I think it's part of a whole context of questions. I guess my next question is, when we thinking about the future, because part of this role is to kind of is not only to see where we are now, it's to look ahead and think, what are the future trends? What is the direction of travel, and how do we make sure that is traversed in a way that's helpful and good and appropriate? What are your thoughts on that? Because like all adopters, we all start at one point, young and fresh-faced 10 years ago, and now we're all we see things differently.
So, what do I see? I see that special guardianship is on the rise. I think I saw the last group of stats saying that in terms of children leaving care, there's more children leaving care to special guardianship than there is to adoption. So I think it's 13% to special guardianship, 12% to adoption. And I'm really positive about that. I believe in family preservation and reunification wherever that's possible. For me, the interest for me is what's in the best interest of the child. And if family units can be kept together, there's so many benefits for that. You never age out of being a nephew, a niece, a grandson or a granddaughter. That is a lifelong solution. Brilliant. When that's not possible, for me, adoption is one of the, well, as far as I can see, it's the only other genuine permanency option. So I'm a foster parent. I love being a foster parent. Foster parents are, not talking about us, but, I've met incredible foster parents right across the country. Fantastic. But fostering is designed to have an end point. Normally at 18 or at 21, if you're lucky, the relationship is not a genuine permanency solution. It's a temporary solution until a child reaches adulthood. So adoption is a genuinely permanent solution. If an adoption breaks down at 22, that is still a fail. It's a problem, isn't it? It's a disruption. Well, if someone ages out of foster care at 22, that's just normal. So I believe in adoption. I think it is a really great solution for children who have no other opportunity to live with their birth families, and I think there's lots of conversations about what needs to maybe innovate and change in it. There are some romanticised views about what adoption involves. Yeah. Some would say there are Victorian views. You've got this picture of the. I don't know if we've all been to the incredible Coreham Bath Centre.
The Foundling Museum.
The Foundling Museum, yeah.
Foundling Museum, and it's heartbreaking, isn't it? Looking around those exhibits. And you see, unfit mothers, I think they were described as, having children removed from them, and then those children kind of transplanted into kind of middle class families, and the parents or the mothers often giving little keepsakes, and just so that there'll be some point of connection between this art embroidered on it, and that seems so brutal. It was so unhelpful. Sorry, can you still hear me? My internet says it's unstable. So that isn't the case. Most children have family networks. They may well have siblings. They may have aunties and uncles. And so there's a whole conversation going around about, well, what does it mean in terms of genuine familial connectivity for children who are being adopted? And
that's the
when it's in the best interest.
Yeah. I mean, but it seems like that's the nettle that the industry or the sector is really struggling to grasp, because potentially the adoptive parents the new adoptive parents don't see it in those terms, and I think that then 10 years down the line they maybe do see it in those terms, and by then it's too late. And so I know there was the work that Andrew Christie and Hugh Thornbury did.
It is hard. It's really hard. Yes, on innovation in permanency, I agree. I think we've got to look at that. For me, again, the question is always what's in the best interest of the child. Yeah. Sometimes it's not in the best interest of the child to have ongoing contact with birth family because of abuse or neglect or addictions or all sorts of issues could preclude that. But when it is in the best interest of the child, what does that look like? How do we make it real? Those questions I think we've all got to grapple with, and then the balance between special guardianship and adoption might change, actually. I was talking to Lucy Peake yesterday from Grandparents Plus, and we were talking about the fact that some grandparents feel, even if they're not actually told, that if they don't become the special guardian for this child, they will never see the child ever again. Yeah. And that means they're making really tough choices. Yeah. Is it in the best interest of the child for a 9-month-old to be living with a 70-year-old? That was one of our fostering experiences as we kind of handed over to permanency. But I totally understand if you're made that impossible kind of Sophie's choice, of course you're going to do that. So I just think we need to have a genuine, real conversation about this, and it's going to be difficult, and people are worried it's going to scare off adopters. I kind of want to say I'm up for scaring off adopters if we're going to come up with a system that's better for children. But I think we can inspire, and I think we can help adopters walk through that journey maybe quicker, so it's not 10 years later that they realise how important that is. They understand that right from the beginning. I'm
really interested by that, because I think Scott and I have taken the view that often adoption recruitment is based on, it's all focused on adopters and what they get. And I think that I'm really excited by the idea of saying to people, this is what you can give. And I think that that is inspiring to see the needs of children. And, you know, there's a few people who've come on and told their stories, and that's their perspective, is that we did this was a positive choice. It wasn't to try and fulfill our need for children. It was, we saw there was a need and we gave. And not from a faith perspective, just from a humanist perspective.
Great.
And they are people who go, well, let's get the aunties and uncles in. And they are prepared to accept the kind of the messiness of a new contemporary type of adoption. But we've kind of gone back to this current model of, you know, the current recruitment, which is you can adopt, not should you adopt.
Should you adopt,
yeah.
Which I
totally agree, Al. And it's been the way we've been trying to inspire people to consider fostering and adoption. A lot of people think fostering is for people who don't have any qualifications or any money, and the children are a means to get money. And I don't think it's wrong for foster parents to be paid, just like I don't think it's wrong for nurses or firefighters to be paid. But that can't be the primary motivation. The primary motivation is, how can I make a difference to a child's life? And similarly, people think adoption is only for people who are unable to have their own birth children. And I'm saying it is a fantastic way to form family, but it's got to be about what's best for children. I've always been about finding families for children, not children for families. It's got to be that way around.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think interestingly as well, just to add to that, I think that the class thing as well, you know, we're still perceived, parents are still perceived as middle class. And I totally rebuff that completely, because I don't think that is the case anymore. And, you know, I sit on a lot of adoption panels, or have done over the years, you know, and I don't think your salary any longer dictates your class. So, you know, to say everybody is middle class who adopts, I think is wrong. You know, I mean, I don't class myself as middle class. A lot of people do, because I'm an adoptive parent, which, you know, that's kind of, that's a really kind of, it's, it's an interesting one. Shut up. Right, conscious of time, Krish, because you'll need your cup of tea before your next meeting, as we will as well. So hopefully we've not offended you. What I was going to say, because there's still a few questions to ask, and I think that if we ask any more, then we're going to be here for hours. If it's all right with you, what we'd like to do is we'd like to send you the questions. If there's any that you don't feel that you had the opportunity to answer and you wish to answer them, then feel free, and we can put that out on a link for people to...
There was some that were very specific to social care, and if I was feeling malevolent, I was going to say them and kind of... But I wasn't. But after being so forthright with you yesterday, I felt it was inappropriate to be as forthright again. But people, I think, it reflects the nature of the adoption community, is that they're people who are really switched on and kind of have got high expectations, and will pick anyone up who is kind of seen to not kind of quite muster up enough kind of insight into the system. But I'll send them through to you, and you can maybe, I'm sure we could send them back. But anyway, it was about signs of safety and solution-focused work with children. And I thought that's a bit it's not fair to ask you that on a Tuesday morning, is it?
But, just a reminder, and say hopefully you will come back as well, because we've never had the opportunity to talk to somebody from the beginning of their appointment and to see that all the way through. And you know, we've been at this for 4 years now as a podcast, so you know, it'd be nice to kind of follow that journey through and see where it leads, and see kind of, and be the people that maybe challenge you a little bit if, you know, we think you're...
I'm totally open for it. I think there's lots and lots of opportunities for things to get better. I'd love to tell you it's a full-time appointment. Sadly, it's 40 days a year. So I've got to pick what are the issues that are going to have the most amount of benefit for kids. And so sadly, that means we're not going to be able to fix everything. We've got to prioritise. And we don't even have command and control. I don't get to tell the government what to do. I wish I did. But on a lot of issues, I'm sure.
It's the worst job in the world. I mean, it is, because you have no actual authority to change anything, but you are in charge of everything. in the public, you know, the adoptions are. do some stuff, but you've got no power to do it.
Yeah. Well, all we've got is finding that common ground, putting the needs of children first, communicating, persuading, networking, and encouraging, and let's see what we can muster. So I appreciate your help. You guys are doing an amazing job communicating with the community, representing those voices. So I think there's a lot of good we could do together. Let's find that common ground, and we can make an impact.
So that means we're still talking.
Sure. Yeah, why not?
Cool.
On that note, I think we all need to go to our next meeting. So, Krish, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
for being so open and honest with us. And we will talk to you soon.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
See you soon. All right. See you in the next meeting.
So, what do you make of all that then, Scott, me lad?
Well, I have to say, first of all, just to kind of give Krish a little bit of kudos, really, because he's literally started in this role this week, and he agreed to come and talk to us two Muppets. So, I mean, he's not. Let's face it, he's not really, up to 100%. He is, but he's not. If you know what I mean. No. I mean, he said himself there was a couple of things that we brought up that he actually didn't realise or didn't know. So,
well, no, already we were just having this conversation before we started to record about how we should go easy on him, and then I've got these feelings coming up inside of me about going, but you applied for the job. You should know this stuff. This is part of your prep, isn't it?
There's an element of that, of course there is. But we live and breathe it through a work situation, as in. You were involved in the ASF when it launched. I came along after it had launched to promote it when I worked at Adoption UK. It's taken me a long time to get to know the ins and outs of it. It's not just
He's an adoptive parent.
I know, but I was an adoptive parent. But even granted it was new, but there's a few things. But I mean, yes, okay, I get you, but equally. It's Tuesday. It's 2 days in, mate. Come on, give him a break.
Yeah, fair enough. No,
you know what? You could say the same when he first was appointed. His social media, which obviously we covered in the interview.
Yes.
I mean, his social media was very much. It started on the kind of adoption thing, and then he caught up with himself after that. And I think that, maybe someone had pointed that out to him that, it's the ASGLB, it's not just adoption. Who knows? I don't know. I think, he does deserve a little bit of kudos for coming on in day 2 of his role.
Oh, yeah.
And let's face it, you're not exactly the most forgiving of people, are you? If someone...
What the heck? I'm lovely. I'm nicer than... And I thought of... Well, I spent a lot of time thought about this because I thought we have to show some sort of comparison with how we treat Andrew Christie, which was very much conversational. Yeah. And I think we can't then sort of like go at someone else because they're new in the job. That's just not appropriate. So I think he gave a good account of himself generally, given his time in. I kind of had this moment, and I'm not sure whether I will say this. I had this moment where there was this feeling that there was this slight rabbit in the headlights of, I'm not... this realisation that the Adoption Special Guardian Leadership Board, the chair of that board, is a high-profile job with no power.
Yeah.
You're expected to do a lot, and you've got no way of doing it.
Yeah.
So, we'll see.
You make a good point.
Thank you.
And, I think it is more of a kind of workhorsey kind of role, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Look at Andrew, and we had a text exchange earlier, and you reminded me of Andrew achieved quite a lot in terms of regionalisation. And kind of some of the data that the board produces now wasn't produced way back when, and all that sort of stuff. But I think that with the current the board in the way it is, and I'm sure that that's one of Krish's tasks is to look at how the board stands and who's on it and who feeds into it and all that sort of stuff and how they do it. It's I think it's his task to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's his task to kind of make sure it works better. And what I mean by that is that the SGLB bit, special guardians, kinship carers. No, they came along quite late into Andrew's kind of tenure. So expanding it out to so many people, it's a hard job. So, I don't envy the kind of role that Krish has got to take on.
And it's 20 days a year. Sorry, 40 days a year, isn't it?
Yeah. That's not a lot of days when you think about it.
No, as he said, it's 1 day a week, which is...
Yeah.
No, I've reflected about... I thought a lot about it beforehand because I looked at the questions that were coming through, and I thought there were some really valid questions. I think we covered almost all of the questions, but maybe not asked them specifically.
Yeah.
I think there was some really good... I think there were some questions that were perhaps a little bit disingenuous, asking him specific issues around different social work models, which felt a little bit disingenuous. And if the conversation had gone a different way, I would have maybe kind of gone that way. But I felt there's a genuineness about him that his desire is to see an improvement in the system. I do think the interesting thing, like when comparing to Andrew had a really clear remit through the Vision for Change 2020, which was the REAs. You make the REAs work, and so Andrew's perhaps someone who was much more system-wise and worked within the systems and kind of, Birmingham and all those different places. So he had that job of just changing REAs. It's not clear I think it is clear that it's actually a recruitment role, isn't it? I think the government would probably say... And I did have a conversation with him because I go to the board about other stuff, and one of the questions I asked him was, well, what is the government's agenda actually? Because what it looks like now is it is just recruitment, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of you've got a little bit of a bee in your bonnet about that one.
Oh, crikey, yeah.
Anyway, should we talk about that more then? But it'll be interesting. I mean, it's undoubtedly not an easy job. It won't be an easy job, and especially with all that's going on in the minute with COVID and all this kind of stuff. Because let's face it, the DFE are under quite an intense pressure there with all kind of all the stuff that they're doing, and a lot of that is done by civil servants, let's face it, and we know some of those ourselves, don't we? And we know that they are doing their best. I guess that like you say, it's just because he has an idea or there's an idea brought to him, it doesn't mean to say that he's going to be able to do very much about it. It might be a case of sparking an idea, but it won't be his role to kind of take it forward.
No, and I'm really not worried, but I am really wondering what's going to happen with the work that the likes of Hugh and Andrew, how Hugh Thornbury did for Andrew, and I can't remember the other person, Hannah. There was a woman, wasn't there, who did it with Hugh? Yeah. Forgive me. And they did some work about the future of special guardianship around permanency, and I wonder whether that will get shelved, which would be really unfortunate. And I've spoke to Hugh recently, and he was sort of chatting a bit about that work, and he said he would come on the podcast, so maybe we'll have him on in a couple of weeks.
Be nice.
Which would be lovely, but I think that I do wonder whether, I think we then went on to the Adopt a Reference Group meeting afterwards, which we kind of alluded to, which again really highlighted for me the challenge was that we had 2 hours where we were raising lots and lots of issues, but interestingly, not one of them is one that was mentioned in the government manifesto. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So in some ways there's this, I did say to Krish when we weren't recording, I said, you've got to choose with this job, to my mind, because I'd given it a lot of thought, the job, beforehand, because obviously I put my application in, jokey application, didn't get anywhere whatsoever, but I did think about it. How relieved am I didn't get it.
Imagine that interview for the Adoption and Fostering podcast.
Well, that would have been an interesting conversation. But I do think I've forgotten my point now. I'm sure it was good. It did make me think about this idea that if you please one set of people, are you potentially making another set of people happy? That you've got the ADA, the Association of Directors of Children's Services, who are all kind of hovering over, so you don't necessarily have true representation of social care. But then you've got a board. You've got a board of 30 people. What on earth? Yeah. Can be done, and he talked about that. So
it's huge.
I suppose all we can do is wait and see. I think you raised a really good point, which is this idea that Andrew was a bureaucrat. if I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but he knows how to affect change. He's not interested in he's not in any way trying to build a persona or profile. He's very much just gets on with the job, which is absolutely fine, and that's who he is, and that's in no way to kind of dismiss him. And Krish is someone he is a personality. If you look at his Twitter feed, you see that he's got a persona. He's is that maybe more like Martin Neri was, who was another person who was kind of a bit more of a character and played it out on a national stage. I remember there being tweet exchanges with Martin Neri back in the day. People have a go at him and he'd kind of knock them back. I'm not suggesting we should do that to Krish.
No, let's not do a Twitter pile-on, please.
No, we're not do that. But what I mean is that Krish is maybe one of his strengths is that communication, that he'll engage with the community on a very intimate way. And I think,
yes, you're bang on with that. And I think because there was a point today when we were chatting to him that I thought, I should say something about that, because he does pause for thought on BBC Radio 2, doesn't he, in the morning?
That's right, sometimes.
He does. And it's interesting because I am, as you know, I'm not anybody. Well, I'm not a person who has faith in the same way that yourself does or Krish does, but I always find myself listening to him. Because it's not necessarily about the faith. It's what he's saying. It's how he's saying it. It's his whole kind of
he's got a gift.
Personality. Yeah, he has. And I think that's really interesting. And everybody's going to go, ooh, does he do that? Yes, he does. So yeah, it is an interesting one. And the social media thing. I brought that up quite early on in the interview because Andrew Christie never really engaged with social media in the same way that you do, I do, Krish does. So it'll be interesting to see how that will change, because actually he'll be a lot more accessible to people generally, and I've no doubt he'll get the gripes and the angry kind of messages and all that sort of stuff. But I hope that it's used in a way that's constructive rather than kind of doing the old Twitter pile-on to say this is that, all that sort of stuff. So,
yeah, I mean, that's not. I was thinking as well. Andrew did do consultations, but he howked himself around the regions, didn't he? And he got into forums and stuff. But it's not in that public way. I do think that the one of the questions, I can't remember which one was asked it about. He is enduringly positive on his. And I think it was the first time I'd ever heard him sort of reflect on some of the challenges, and obviously he didn't want to talk about his children, and absolutely didn't want to know about that.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
But actually, discovering later on that that he does experience those challenges. Well, we need to know that, especially if you're holding intent, if you're kind of just a enduringly cheerful, positive promoter of adoption, and getting people in through the door, only for them to go, I have those struggles as well. It feels that's where you want there to be an alignment of those two worlds, not just, So I think it was. We'll see how he goes, won't we? That's all we can do.
Yeah. Well, I was genuine when I said, come back and speak to us again, because I think that, like I said in the interview, that we've never had the opportunity to lampoon somebody from day one and follow them through their journey, because Andrew was already in place and we were kind of finding their feet with the podcast back then. So now we're in the perfect position to kind of, support him as well as kind of, and not interrogate him. That's the wrong word. Torment him, interrogate him. I don't know. But kind of not call him to account. But you know what I'm saying? It's just like, if we feel there's something not going right, then why could we not be the people to challenge him? Because I think that with our over 100,000 downloads, I think that
that was just last year. That was just last year.
That was just last year. Yeah, exactly. So that's not total, but
we're pushing 250,000.
Just slipped that in there for
I see what you did. I promised someone that I would answer a question.
Well, I'm dying to hear this one because you hinted at it earlier.
No, it's not a difficult question to ask. I got myself, to be honest, I was doing something, and I think you were probably doing the same. I was doing some preparation for some training I'm doing for a group of social workers about violent aggressive behaviour in children.
Yes.
And I was just looking through my notes and kind of just putting it together just to meet the specific needs of this group of people. And halfway through Saturday afternoon, I went, do you know what? What the heck are we doing? We kind of every professional, every family kind of has who's been through that process or has worked through that process or works in that process, kind of says, actually, we know that challenging behaviour is kind of just bread and butter for almost all families. Not exclusive, it's not inevitable, but a high level of families. So how can we ethically just push the you can adopt? So I put a little tweet out to that effect, and that kind of like kicked off. And then I got emboldened by the abject power of people listening to me and liking my tweet, which just shows how shallow I am. So I put another one out, and I said, when we talk about, because I thought people may think that I'm against adoption, and I'm not, and I've got a complicated perspective.
I did see that. Yeah.
So I said, one of the things I said was, I am not against adoption. However, I think it should always be as a last resort. And then someone emailed me about 6 hours later. How they got my email, I don't know. I'll have to. It's probably, my kids are probably giving it out at the street corners. Not my kids. And the question was why I believe in adoption as last resort. And someone was questioning that, and I kind of really struggled to articulate what I meant. But I guess that's a phrase you would use. Would you use that phrase?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and I think even more so now than ever. We talked about it today with I talked about it today with the ARG about, adopters' experiences have been relevant and are relevant. They're still relevant, and I'm not taking away from that, and the voice needs to be heard. But we're in a situation now where I listen to the people who it directly affects, who go through, the kind of living with strangers and, becoming family members of a family that they don't know and all that sort of stuff. And I totally agree with that as a concept, that it should be the last resort. I don't believe that adoption should be the first thing that's looked at. And I think that, family preservation, I know that there isn't enough money in the world that could, help some of these families. That's the reality, isn't it? There's wants and there's needs, and family preservation I agree with, but it's just not a practical. It's not a practical solution for every single family. But there's other options before adoption, and adoption, is to provide some, almost like a short circuit to the permanence, if that makes sense. So rather than, dilly-dally and looking at family members and, all that sort of stuff, it's like, right, okay, well, there's nobody there after, I don't know how long they spend looking into the background of each family to see if there's, anybody within the family who a child can have some permanence with. But, adoption just seems too quick, and that goes for the whole process, not just for that. I totally agree with you on that. I feel my blood's up a little bit, actually, that you would even be questioned on it. But it should be. I mean, come on. This is something that's going to affect a child for the rest of their lives, and they're going to have enough to deal with without actually having to live with strangers, And I think if we listen to the voices of those people who it has affected directly like that, then we would come to that conclusion, surely. No? Or am I just being a bit...
No, honestly, I feel like I've lit in the blue touch paper and off you've gone. I tell you.
Give me their name and their email address. I'll email. I'll articulate.
Give you a piece of their mind. No, I totally agree. I have nothing to add to that. I think that it has to be the default position that it's the severity of the act of adoption has to be justified in all cases, and that's absolutely fine. So that's absolutely
I mean, a lot of people might not see what I see on Twitter, because obviously who you follow and who retweets stuff and who likes stuff and all that kind of thing. I might not reply to stuff, but I am listening. The reason I don't reply is because I don't need a pile on, to be perfectly frank with you. Yeah. But I see, adoptees and adopted people's tweets and how they're feeling and what they're expressing. And, there's one recently about names and all that sort of stuff. And, there's a large amount of it is kind of American, which is, but it's still valid. There's still something that connects it to our system. And I might not reply to it. And the reason, like I say, is because I don't need to pile on. But it's there, and if we just scratch the surface and actually listen, we might learn a little bit more than, just being the solution to a child who's perhaps,
No, I totally agree. I think that we're it's one of the challenges, isn't it? Because I think that, we consistently say the person I was the day I adopted is not the person I am now. And my views have changed, but you can't undo what's been done, but you can try and make it better for others. No, that makes perfect sense.
Fabulous.
Well, that seems really short and sweet, but I don't have anything. I mean, we are, maybe if people have got this far in the podcast, what are we doing, Scott?
We are doing learning stroke practice half day, which is very difficult to articulate in a flyer or something like that. Because I think when we talk about learning practice days, we think, well, that's for social workers or for practitioners or for therapists. But it's not. It's on managing... I forgot what it's called now. This is a great advert for it.
You're on fire. You're absolutely on fire. Managing
and aggressive behaviour.
Violent and aggressive behaviour. Managing challenging and violent and aggressive behaviour.
Yeah, exactly. Which is an interesting strapline, if you like. Let's call it a strapline, because it took me a long time to understand personally that some of the behaviours that I saw was actually challenging behaviour, and in actual fact it's not just a child being a child. They're actually being a little bit sneaky, a little bit aggressive with their whatever you call it. And of course right now it's affecting a lot of us way more than it should be. Absolutely. Way more than it normally is, because we're all under the same roof for this amount of time every day and weeks, and but it's a half day. It's me and you. We're doing our own sessions, and we're covering some of the research that was done. I'm going to deal with that and say I'm going to share what parents said, and how professionals could deal with it, how they could support families, and then you're going to be doing
finger puppets and creative dance. I think what we want to do is we want to try and get that balance, which I think we tried to previously, is that lived experience married with the kind of academic learning and the research and good practice, and so people can come away having sort of had their minds kind of stretched a little bit, but also having been sort of sent away with really practical stuff to go, I can try that. Principles rather than just hey, do this and do that, but principles people can imbibe. So that's on the 12th of...
That's on 12th of March.
Yes.
Yeah. And like I say, it's half day.
Yeah, it'll be recorded, so if you can't make it on the day,
yes,
then you can
exactly. Yeah. There's a number of options. So if you're a couple, we have a package for couples, shall we say. If you want CPD accreditation, then there's a CPD option. Otherwise, there's other options on there. So the Eventbrite link will take you into all that you need to know.
And if you want to get a gang of friends together, you can come before. If you buy 4 tickets, you get them for the price of... No, hang on. If you get 5 tickets, you get 4 for the price of 4.
Get 4 free. Yeah. You don't get 4 free. You get 5 for 4. Yes, exactly.
I tell you, we should be in advertising, shouldn't we? It's kind of there's this thing going on at this time in this place, and it's kind of cost this much, and it's for these people. And please come.
And if we remember it's on, then we might turn up as well. But No, to be fair, actually, we weren't sure whether this was going to be a thing, but actually, the number of tickets we've sold in a week has actually blown my brains well out there. There's a need for this kind of thing, but I think it's more about what the provision of it plus the cost of it, because actually, it's it's not very much at all, is it? Let's face it. For half a day learning about this sort of stuff and getting real kind of exactly. So, proving to be very popular and already start. I've actually, this is probably the most prepared I've been. What have we got? 2 months to go, and I've even started analysing all the data, and I'm starting to pick out all the bits.
Oh, get you! This is
I tell you,
new year, new you. Have you made any resolutions? I didn't even notice.
I have, but I'm not sharing them until they actually come to any fruition, because there's no point at the minute, is there?
I forgot. I
actually posted something the other day and said, if this is how 2021 is going to be, I'm cancelling my subscription after the first 7 days, because it's just, nothing's changed, does it?
Pretty bleak, isn't it?
It is.
Having said that, we've got a hamster or a gerbil.
Yes, you do, don't you?
Yeah, that's kind of pepped our lives up, and so it's actually given the teenagers something to put her affection and happiness into.
Well, she's got to it somewhere.
Yeah, so it was just So she so actually it's worked really well. She's become very much more personable. We've had sentences and everything out of her since.
Wow, is that because you have to pay for the food and all the things that go with the hamster? Or?
Totally not. She totally funding it herself. Totally.
Oh wow! Well
totally
done,
invested. Yeah, bless her little heart. Hey,
that's fabulous.
I feel like that we've run out of things to say because I was
just going to share that today when we were at the ARG that my kitten decided to pop onto my shoulder in front of everybody and stopped the meeting for about all of 30 seconds because
creepy.
I was asked about it. It was creepy. She was flicking her tail into my mouth. That's how creepy it was, honestly.
And you were letting her.
Well, what am I going to do? She's only 12 weeks old. For goodness sake. She needed some love.
Oh, crikey, that's the world of the strange. Well, I feel that that's been very productive. I think that as we move into this year, we've got a lot. I think we're going to try and get a bit more spiky.
Yes, I think we are growing in our confidence of being a little bit more spiky, to be perfectly honest with you.
Yeah, so I think we're going to push out. I had this mad moment, and we are on the tail end of the podcast. This is where we kind of talk about all kinds of rubbish. I had this.
Yeah, but nobody listens to us, so we can get away with it.
No, I had this mad moment where I thought we should invite the minister on.
Oh, do you know what? You put that out there, and now you've put that out there on the podcast. You know we're going to get tweets saying, yes, do it.
No.
I think that the minister is quite engaged in adoption, actually, for those that don't know, Vicky Ford. She's quite engaged in adoption and special guardian and all that sort of stuff. So
maybe we should then.
I think we maybe should put in a request to the big house and see what comes back.
That's time to put on our big boy pants on, isn't it, that day? But what I did...
shirt on that day.
Well, yeah, and what I also thought was we should maybe get someone from the Labour Party, see what their views are. I mean, in some ways it's irrelevant because they're not in power, but it'd be interesting because potentially one day they might be.
Well, maybe sooner than we think.
Oh, crikey, who knows? But I think we should ask, let's get some future views because, so let's do that this year.
Yes, I would like to speak to Emma Llewellyn-Buck because she is quite an advocate for care experienced and adoption and all that sort of stuff. And she did express an interest in coming on before, but I don't think we followed it up, did we? Or did we?
No, we'll have to track that down. We'll have to get that done. So that's what we'll do. We promise you this year we'll get some politicians on. We'll get some politicians on.
We'll grill the politicians.
That's true. I'm going to go off and I'm going to go and sew this together and then flush my head down a bucket of ice because I'm sick of looking at screens. And then I am going to wake up tomorrow. To be fair, I'm
sick of looking at you today.
Oh, well... I didn't like to say it, but that feeling is
mutual, is it? Yeah,
very mutual. Well, as always, have a good week and bon jovi.
Anchovy.
Totally. Do you want to do a selfie before we get into it?
Oh, yeah, let's do it. Hang on.
I'm just conscious that that's like me anticipating it ending really badly.
That's a smile. Then
just
that's a confident start.
If I'd known you were doing selfies at this time in the morning, I would have done something.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
There we go.
Right,
I don't really want the plain background.
1, 2, 3. Great. I think I got us. Yeah, everyone's smiling. That works.
Oh, good stuff.